while so many others sit the fence. But if you want to know where the Word of God stands, and believe it wants to use your feet and hands, it's time to take your faith out of the seats and into the streets, and come along with me. If you'll only look, then you will see on WCNTV.
Hello and welcome again to WCNTV, and we are live. I'm Rob Pugh, your host, and WCNTV is actually a kind of a branch or an outreach of our primary ministry, which is Wisconsin Christian News. We are a 48-page nationally distributed Christian newspaper based in Wisconsin, and you can find out more about that at wisconsinchristiannews.com. We have a great guest for you today, and I'm excited. He was with us a few months ago and back again today is Judge Roy Moore from Alabama. But before we get into that, I would like to do a little bit of scripture here, because we are living in some lawless and just chaotic times. Matthew 24:12, because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. And Moses, when he was on his deathbed, gave some of the most important words of his life in Deuteronomy 8. He said, be careful that you don't forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his command, the ordinance and statutes I'm giving you today. When you eat and are full and build beautiful houses to live in, and your silver and gold multiply, and everything else you have increases, be careful that your heart does not become proud and you forget the Lord your God. You may say to yourself, my power, my own ability have gained this wealth for me. But remember that the Lord your God gives you the power to gain wealth in order to confirm his covenant he swore to your fathers as it is today. If you ever forget the Lord your God and go after other gods to worship and bow down to them, I testify against you today that you will perish. And 2 Timothy 3:1-4. But know this, difficult times will come in the last days. There's an understatement for you. People will become lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, without love for what is good, traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Well, as I said, our guest today is Judge Roy Moore from Alabama, perhaps the most honest, godly man of integrity I know. Judge Roy was elected as Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court in 2000. I first heard about him in 2003 when he was removed from his position as Chief Justice by a judicial panel for refusing to remove a monument of the Ten Commandments. I think we have a photo there. Mike, do we have that? There we go. Yes. So he refused to remove this monument of the Ten Commandments that he had installed in the rotunda of the Alabama Judicial Building to acknowledge the sovereignty of God. Judge Moore was overwhelmingly reelected by a vote of the people of Alabama as Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court in 2012, and he took office in January of 2013. But just 3 years later, he was suspended for upholding the sanctity of marriage as between one man and one woman. He's since been working with his organization, the Foundation for Moral Law, and he's most recently been fighting the unjust mandates regarding the coronavirus lockdowns and forced wearing of masks, and most recently, election fraud. You know, it's interesting that we're now seeing the warnings of Scripture playing out in real time as our country is in utter chaos because we have forgotten and shunned God, and we've despised his law, his 10 commandments. And instead, we've invented more than 10,000 of our own man-made rules and laws to replace them with. But still, there is no justice in our land, and it seems the words of Moses in Deuteronomy are being proved true today. Our country seems to be perishing. Judge Roy, welcome back. I'm so glad you were willing to come back on the show with us and join us again. Try to wade through all the confusion and the mess we're dealing with.
Well, thank you, Rob. It's nice to be with you.
So, we want to talk about the election today, and of course, the future of our country. I believe we're fighting for the very survival of Western civilization and the very survival of America as a sovereign nation. How do you feel about things?
Well, I think you're right. I think that if we don't get a handle on how we vote and elect our president and vice president, what have we left? That's the most important positions to us in our country as president and vice president. We elect representatives to the Senate and House, and of course they appoint justices to the Supreme Court. And we do have three branches of government, but the president and vice president are the only ones that we elect as a people. And if those elections aren't honest, if they're not fair, and believe me, I've been through elections that were not fair. And
I know.
you're at a loss. People don't understand how it feels to spend months and even years running for an office and raising money that you don't have, and making talks and disrupting your normal life and your job. And then you get to an election and you put everything in there and it's stolen. And it comes about one night, you have no money left, you have nothing to do but accept the results that you know are not true. And it's devastating. And I've been through that experience. Now, admittedly, the president has more money than I've ever had, but still it's a wrong thing if we can't elect people to office and feel that our elections are honest. In this past election, I feel was very, very corrupted.
Well, and there's overwhelming evidence of election fraud. But, it seems to be there's no justice, even with more evidence of fraud than I've ever seen in my life. The courts don't seem to care. The judges rule in favor of corruption. Even the Republicans don't seem to care. Mitch McConnell came out and just said that he congratulated Joe Biden, and he urged the Republicans not to support Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, that's typical of establishment in Washington. They're only there for power. And I've tried to tell that to the president, but I haven't been able to get through to him. There's too many people that were just backing him because of who he was and the position he had, not because they believed in what he stood for. And I think the Republican establishment is very corrupted in Washington, as is the Democrat establishment. When I talk about establishment, I mean people that are there for one reason and one reason only: to keep the power, keep the money, keep the positions they have, the importance. They're at the highest elected position they'll ever have. And it's just, that's what they live for. And if you break their system, if you embarrass them, if you put them on the defensive, they'll react, and they'll react, harshly. And I think they're not backing Trump. They haven't backed him. And of course, the Democrats have been out to take him down from the beginning of his term. And I think he is, I think in this election, we've seen how the machines have been altered. We see mail-in ballots. It's not just a voting thing. This is a constitutional thing. The Constitution sets a particular day for elections, electing electors. And Congress shall choose under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 4. They choose the date. And that's when we're supposed to have elections. When you have mail-in ballots that come in weeks and weeks and months even before the election day, what are you doing? Well, you're doing something that has not normally been done. We've had absentee ballots since 1865, and then it was extended to beyond soldiers in the war between the states. It later was extended to other people, but there's always been a reason you had to be available or not available to send an absentee ballot. This election just completely destroyed that, and you could send in your ballot whenever you wanted, no checks on who they are. This was a complete fraud. I knew this election was called before the election occurred, because when I heard that absentee ballots were coming in like this, or not absentee ballots, just ballots, mail-in ballots, and there's no check on it, I knew it was going to be stolen, and it was.
Well, yeah, I've never seen anything like it. There were not just the mail-in ballots, which were ridiculous, but the drop boxes. Are you aware that Mark Zuckerberg funded those drop boxes? And they were unsupervised. There were security cameras on them, but they were solar powered, so most of them didn't work. But he funded that to the tune of $400 million.
Well, I think a lot of millionaires and billionaires were behind this scheme. Soros and Gates were certainly in there. Some of the machines are connected to Soros and Gates, or at least Soros. And I think that we've got to wake up to when people, if they didn't realize this election was stolen, they got a problem. They're not, you don't get it from the news media, because
the news media is absolutely complicit in all of this, and that that was obvious on election night.
It certainly was.
So, there was a Gallup poll that came out right after the election, and they found that only 9% of Americans still trust the mainstream media. 9%.
I'm surprised that many still do, but I have recently found out that when they don't want to put something out, they hush it up. And if you mess up or say something and they can jump on it, they sure will. It's completely one-sided, and people need to wake up to the corruption in the news media. It's more than just fake media. It's a design that they have, and that they carry it out.
Yeah, it's a mess. So we had the vote counting that stopped in the middle of the night. Videos showing vans pulling up to polling places, unloading truckloads of ballots, and then suddenly at 4:30 in the morning, everything flipped in favor of Joe Biden. We had Dominion voting systems. The head of Dominion was videotaped, and this was way prior to the election, during a conference call. And he stated, "Don't worry, there's no way Trump is going to win because I've got that handled." That was all taken care of ahead of time.
They handled it right, and people don't understand. They can weight these machines, or they can change them from an outside source, because they programmed these machines, and they've got an internet connection to the votes as they come in, so they know exactly what they have to do. They know exactly how to do it. And this other stuff, this fraud that's going on, mail-in ballots, that's all supplemental. But in the end, they can control the vote. And it generally gets down to a number they've got to control.
Yeah. So, they used every angle, every opportunity they possibly could. And the evidence is overwhelming. And there's loads of evidence. And yet we have Bill Barr saying, no evidence.
Well, I think
what was that?
There's a tendency, I think, that people give up and they let the media call the election, and they certainly did. They call it from the day one. The only way to get back to proper elections is by paper ballots that are retained, and voting on a particular day, and showing your identity. These are common sense things. The Democrats want voting without identity in California. This is crazy. You have to have a driver's license. People go out and take tests, and they'll go to the courthouse. They pay money. They have to renew it often. They've got a driver's license. Why can't we have identity for voters? Is that too harsh? I don't think so. I think it's in my little voting booth that I've voted on. I live out in the country. I've been living there 40, 50 years. They require me to give my license, even though these people have known me all my life. And I volunteer. I do it because that's the system. I come in and I produce my license to them and say, yes, that's who I am. And I sign the signature and I vote. It's all recorded. But in many places across the country, mail-in balance, there was no check. And for people to think that's fair, this is all about power. It's all about morality. And when we have lost our morality, we will proceed to economic and political decline. You know, one thing I like to tell people, Rob, that I found through history was after World War II, General Douglas MacArthur spoke to a Salvation Army meeting, and he said this. He said, history fails to record a single precedence where nations subject to moral decay have not passed a political and economic decline. There will either be a spiritual reawakening or a progressive deterioration leading to ultimate national disaster. And I think we're at the latter right now. I think our distancing ourselves from God and God's laws and truth and morality has infiltrated every aspect of our society, to include the political world. Now it's all about power. And if many people think it's right to steal that vote, many people think it's just a game they play. And it's not. It's something we hold very valuable. And when Texas filed this suit against these 4 states, for the Supreme Court to say they have no standing is ridiculous. They have electors going to Washington to record their elected vote that they think is honest. Of course, there was fraud in Texas as well. But for that vote to be stolen by other states not following rules at all, I think is they have standing, and and they have original jurisdiction in the Supreme Court. The court is required to hear that case, but they said they had no standing.
And there were a total of 19 states that signed on to that, but the Supreme Court shot it down. Who do we appeal to when the Supreme Court shoots it down?
Well, there is no one to appeal to. I think the procedures that now occur, there is a federal statute, 3 U.S.C. Code Section 15, about counting electoral votes in Congress, and it does allow congressmen to object. And I think there's probably going to be some objection. And then eventually, if we find that there can't be a majority determined, then it can be turned back to the House of Representatives under the Article 12th Amendment, I should say. But that remains to be seen. I think that I think we've got a problem. If this election was not contested before the Supreme Court and they wouldn't hear it, we're done as a nation, because the next time these people are going to be wide open. We might as well not have an election in 4 years. 4 senators or anybody else, because the elections are going to be controlled by Smartmatic machines, by machines like Dominion that can be altered. We've got to go back to the identification of voters, paper ballots that are retained and counted by people, with people that can watch from the other party, the other side. Both parties have the same right to watch the counting. I trust the morality of the people is such that they still do regard voting. I do not trust the powers that be that control the machines that count the votes. Now, I still think people have enough morality to want honest elections. 99, I don't know, I mean, what percent, 99% of the people maybe would want an honest election. They want their candidate. But there are people out there that will steal because they think it's right to steal. It's a power game to them.
Well, I've even seen on comments on social media, and especially the other night when Biden did his acceptance speech, some of the comments that were posted with that video, and they're proud that they cheated.
Yeah.
They're coming right out and being proud that they, it's good, good for you, so.
It's played. They're actually bragging about it, and they don't have any, they think it's right to do. That's all I'm saying, Rob. I don't know. It's either we've lost our morality. I don't understand how the Supreme Court failed to recognize that these mail-in ballots didn't violate the constitutional provision that elections were held on a certain day. You know, when they have mail-in ballots come in weeks and months in advance of the day of voting, they miss what the politicians put out at the last minute. All politicians, including myself, we always saved our money till the last, right before the voting day, because that's all the money we had. And that's, well, they did that nationally as well. These things about Biden and China didn't come out to the last few weeks, and yet many people had already voted. That was their plan. That's why they have mail-in votings. Everybody that's seen this election know mail-in ballots had never been allowed at the volume they were allowed in this election. They were always absentee, but these were not absentee ballots. They were mail-in ballots. And that alone is enough to question this election. But
Well, you know, and the DOJ and the mainstream media had this information on Hunter Biden and their connections to China and everything else, and they sat on it. They did nothing with it for over a year.
yeah,
So it came out at the last minute prior to the election, but I honestly don't think anything's going to be done about that.
well, I think that the president, I understood, tried to complain about the mail-in ballots long before the election, and they reject that because there's been no fraud shown, they quote unquote. And now that there's been fraud shown, they say, well, you have no standing. I think that they're avoiding the issue. I think they're subjecting us to future elections that are going to be stolen. And I think they disobeyed the Constitution. But the Constitution provides, as I said, that Congress shall choose the date of electing electors. And they did. That was the date the president and vice president were voted on. That's when they choose who's going to be the electors. It was the same day. For them to allow mail-in ballots that proceeded months before, I think was wrong and led to fraud. And the voting machines we've got experts in my case in 2017 that showed that those voting machines can be changed externally from the outside. And I think the Supreme Court should have heard the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a short video clip here, if we can toss that in here, Mike. And, you know, the other side seems to have an unwritten rule that they have to tell you what they're going to do before they do it. And this is, now people are claiming this is taken out of context or it was edited. It's not. I've seen the full video, and let's see what the horse's mouth has to say here.
Secondly, we're in a situation where we have put together, and you guys did it for our administration, the President Obama's administration before this. We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
I
think so too.
Well, he said it. You know, like I said, they're not hiding the fact that I think they know they lost the election. I think they know that overwhelmingly Trump was elected, but I think they had it fixed, as you said that the Dominion representative had said. They already had it done. They knew what they were going to do, and they know how to do it. I just think that what they rely on is the press calling the election real quickly, wanting the president to concede. If I were the president, I would not concede, because when you concede, it's over. You admit that how can you admit that the fraud was correct? And if it's fraudulent, he should never concede. That's just something that they like to hear somebody say they concede. They expect you to concede. Well, in the fraudulent election, when you know it's stolen, you can't concede. So I think Trump was right not to do that. And I think that the Democrats got away with it so far.
And especially in an election of this magnitude. I mean, I mean, with no exaggeration, this is the choice between socialism, communism, Marxism, and our constitutional republic.
Yeah, our
This
Constitution
is our last chance, guys.
is going to be stolen because when they get in power, if they get in power, they're going to change it. And the people can look back. You know what's amazing, Rob, is that young people don't know where their freedom comes from. Socialists make it seem like everybody's going to be treated equally. No, your rights will be taken from you. Our economy is going to plummet when we keep letting Congress give away our money. And that's what they're doing. And they're basically spending us into debt that we can't recover from. It used to be back in 2017 when I was running Congress and nobody was concerned about a $1 trillion deficit per year. They've spent $3 or $4 trillion just in this past year. It's plummeting. And
Well, and a lot of that has to do with this pandemic of the coronavirus. I'm not saying there isn't a virus, but the response to it is absolutely ridiculous.
well, I'll tell you what the response is, and I'm personally dealing with. I have 2 cases filed in federal court against 2 separate governors for what they've done. Governors don't make law. We should go back to 101 in civics. Governors do not make law. They were given certain emergency powers, but not to take away our constitutional rights. Our constitutional rights in the 1st, 5th, 14th Amendment, they can't take away, but they're doing it, and they're getting away with it because it's a fad. It's like, well, there's an emergency. Well, first, emergencies weren't predicted to occur in the last 9 to 12 months, and into 21. Our present state is continuing this emergency condition. And some of the things they've ordered, like stay at lockdowns, like closing of businesses. You know, the United States Constitution under Article 1, Section 10 says that states can't impair contracts. Well, when you close a business and you say they can't open the door, that's exactly what you're doing. You're impairing contracts with their employees, with other people, with other contractors. That's exactly what they've done. And nobody's calling their hand. It's amazing when they tell churches they can't meet. Church and state are separate under the Constitution. That's separation of church and state does not forbid the acknowledgement of God by the state. It prevents the state from interfering with the way we worship God. People don't understand what the word religion meant to our forefathers. It was not God. It was the duties we owe to the Creator and the manner of discharging those duties. And that was the definition in the dictionary in 1828. And if you include that in the First Amendment, it means Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of the duties you owe to the Creator and the manner of discharging it, or prohibiting the free exercise of the duties you owe to the Creator and the manner of discharging it. That's what it was all about. It was a recognition that God was sovereign and certain things were outside of government's control, like the duties we owe to it. And that was our morality. Our morality was the duties we owed each other, over which government could make laws. And as Washington said, of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. They were indispensable back then, they're indispensable now. And we lose that morality, those standards of right and wrong, we'll end up having stolen elections, we'll end up with corruption in our churches, corruptions in our police, corruptions in our courts, corruptions in the United States Congress. And that's what we've got now. It's all about power. And like the Bible says, no man can serve 2 masters. For either you hate the one and love the other, or you hold the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon or materialism. And today, that's what we're doing. And people don't see the relevance of morality in our political system.
Well, they don't see the relevance of God, I'm afraid to say. We have completely strayed from the intentions of our founding fathers, and we've completely strayed from the Word of God.
And what amazes
even our churches.
This election, Rob, is that I think this was planned out long in advance. I think the whole coronavirus, yes, there's a coronavirus. Yes, there are deaths. But never before have we locked down healthy citizens and told them to stay at home. That came from China, the same, which was the origin of the Wuhan virus.
Right.
You can't tell people to stay at home, and you certainly can't tell them to go to church to worship God. You know, Psalms 91, if anybody wants to find out what the Bible says about epidemics, will tell you. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge, my fortress in God, in Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver you from the noisome pestilence. In the concordance, that was defined as raging virus, raging epidemic. It goes on down further, thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, for the arrow that flieth by day, nor the pestilence that walketh in darkness. We've got to understand that God doesn't want us to live in fear. We want to live, a virus can't be stopped by wearing a mask. In fact, if a mask does anything, it prevents you from breathing fresh air and oxygen, and restricts your breathing of oxygen and makes you breathe the CO2 that you're supposed to exhale. It'll hurt you. And it doesn't stop a germ. A germ virus is such a small particle that the cloth can't stop it. Now, it may prevent people from coughing on others, but we've got to wake up. We've had rules pushed on us that violate our constitutional rights, and there's nothing in the Constitution that allows an epidemic to stop your constitutional rights. But it has in all the states. They've stopped assembly, not only in church but outside of church. You know, the First Amendment allows freedom of assembly. They've stopped that. They've restricted that. They've restricted churches. They're just out of control. They've got power, and the more power they get, the more they like it.
Yep. I want to continue, but we have a short break we need to take. And I think it's about 2 minutes or so. If our producer there can push the right button, and we'll see in a couple minutes.
Yes, sir.
Stay tuned.
At the McClario firm, it all starts with family. We are here to serve you and your family, online or in person. Call today for a free consultation. The McClario firm, your law firm for life.
Are you a parent, mentor, or youth leader searching for meaningful books to engage your middle and high schoolers? Look no further. The books in the Off the Itinerary series by author M. Liz Boyle are receiving outstanding reviews for their compelling plots and strong Christian themes. Avalanche, Chaste, and soon-to-be-released Ablaze are available on Amazon and at most bookstores. Check out mlizboyle.com for discussion guides to accompany each book. Start.
Pornography is a destructive force. It destroys individuals, families, and fuels the out-of-control demand for sex trafficking. 45% of Christian families say porn is a problem in their home, but why aren't churches and public schools talking about this? Fear. People who view porn think they're the only one. It's a lie. Statistically, more people view porn than who do not and struggle in silence. www.linfrederick.com. You can find the book I wrote about my own battle with porn and the presentations that I do for churches and public schools. linfrederick.com.
Okay, we're back, and we are live on WCNTV with Judge Roy Moore from Alabama. And we were talking about the insane overreach of governors and health officials and things regarding the coronavirus. Talking a little bit about the masks there for a little bit. Yes, I agree. They are not healthy for you. My wife and I had to go to Florida and do some work for my father-in-law a couple weeks ago, and we went through, I think, 9 states in a week's time. And then we flew home. But we got our flight home for $11 for both of us. That's another story. But we had to wear a mask for 12 hours straight. And by the time we got home, we had the most throbbing headaches and we, just absolutely worn out. I'm still kind of worn out. It's been a week since we've been back, but in all of the places that we were on that trip, I think I might have seen 3 people not wearing a mask. So the media and the propaganda that's out there is really conditioning people to comply, isn't it?
Well, it is. It conditions you to do things you wouldn't normally do, like give up your right to go to your house and meet with people in your own house because you can't have over 10 in the meeting or something. The things they pushed on us, it's like as they spread this power around, they've tried a little bit more and continue this mask provision. Actually, masks don't stop it. There's been numerous studies that show you that it doesn't stop the virus. And in fact, it's harmful to people. And
it actually makes you sick because you're breathing in your own CO2. You have oxygen deprivation. So
I don't wear a mask and I'm not going to take a vaccine. And I'll tell you, it's, they're going to try to push this vaccine that attaches to your DNA. And it's been proven, it's been shown. They won't talk about it on Fox News or the major televisions, but it does attach to your DNA. And it's not a good thing, in my opinion.
Well, I talked about it yesterday. I do a national radio commentary twice a week and had the biggest response of any program I've ever done on the radio. And I did have, out of all of those contacts that either called or emailed me yesterday, after I exposed what was, basically it was exposing the ingredients of the vaccine and the dangers of it. I did have one pharmacist from Pennsylvania call me, tell me I'm a right-wing religious wacko.
Let him take the vaccine.
Yeah, and he said, I've been giving vaccines for years and they've never hurt anyone. Well, you know that vaccine manufacturers are exempt from any kind of prosecution.
Oh, yeah.
So,
take the vaccine if they want. There's personal liberty, freedom, they can take it, but they can't make me take it. Now, I know about Jacobson versus Massachusetts in 1905 before you ask or before any legalist starts to point it out. That's not what it said. It said that there was no constitutional violation even brought up before the court. There is a constitutional violation in this case, and I won't go into it anymore, but to point out Jacobson versus Massachusetts doesn't scare me a bit. I'm not taking the vaccine. It will identify you as a person. There are identifying characteristics to it, and that's what it's about. And they're going to try to force people to take it. And what's the reasoning? If I don't take a vaccine, who's liable to get a disease? Myself.
Exactly. If the vaccine works and it protects you,
right,
then what are you worried about?
What are you worried about other people not taking it? It's, I feel herd immunity is being reached as we speak, and that's what stops viruses. But to take this vaccine is the next step. That's going to be the next step. And the courts, I believe, are not addressing these plain violations of constitutional rights. In 1947, in Everson versus Board of Education, the United States Supreme Court opinion was written by Hugo Black. Hugo Black said, if the Establishment Clause means anything, it means people can't be told by government to go to church, which we agree with, nor can it prohibit people from going against their will. And that's exactly what they've done in this case, and no court has addressed that. Scalia in 1990 in Smith versus Employment Division said that assembly at church was something you had a right to, and to deny that assembly would be a violation of your religious freedom. Well, what's happened today? Where are our courts? They've forgotten that. And that's just since 1990. That's not long ago. I think we've got to wake up and realize that where the Constitution says we've got a right, it's not their right to take it from us because of a pandemic.
Well, in my area, it's sad to say, we still have several churches that have been closed since March, and they're still closed. They're still online streaming only, and
Well,
that's
how they do,
sad.
I wonder how they do communion or how they do the other things. And if they can't assemble in the congregation and worship God, then what are they afraid of?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Anyway, getting back to the election situation, which is really we're kind of running out of time on that.
Yep.
But the Dominion voting systems were designed purposely to switch votes.
That's right.
And the federal elections acceptable error rate on that is 0.0008%. But it was found to have a 68% error rate in Michigan.
Yeah.
And then just yesterday, they came out with news from Fulton County, Georgia, of a 94% error rate.
Well,
And they still say there's no evidence.
there's plenty of evidence that you can manipulate those machines, and that it was done in this election. I know it was done in my election in 2017. Nobody was watching at that time, and I didn't have the money to proceed on appeal. But I think that clearly they're doing that, and I think it's shown in certain states. And again, for the United States Supreme Court to avoid addressing fraud in this election, there's a provision in the Constitution that if no majority could be chosen, then it's turned to the House of Representatives. So they foresaw such problems that they might have, and the House of Representatives would vote one vote per state to elect the president. And I think in this case, there's clearly fraud, and I think the Supreme Court should have found it. But right now, I think it will pass to the House of Representatives and the Senate. If they object to a state's electors, they can do that there under 3 USC Section 15 of the code.
Well, we've heard rumors, I guess, of possible solutions for this. President Trump could do institute the Insurrection Act, and he signed an executive order in 2018 regarding election fraud. Can you explain a little bit about what that entails?
Well, basically, I'm not as familiar with the Insurrection Act as I should be, so I'm not going to address that. I think that before that occurs, it has to pass Congress. Congress has the right to object to elections, and that's contained in the like I said, the code, federal code right now under 3 USC Section 15. How that's going to play out, I would think, would be first.
Mm-hmm. What do you know about the executive order?
Well, I know he signed an executive order about insurrection, but yeah, I don't want to address something that I don't know as much about as I should.
Yeah, well, and I don't blame you. I had every intention of doing my show prep more thoroughly today, but I just ran out of time, so I don't have that information either. But so what happens on January 6th? The Electoral College votes are unsealed.
Yeah.
Do you think the Republicans in the House and Senate are going to have the integrity to correct this?
I think some will object to the electoral votes of certain states, and I think they will. I hope they do. I don't think, if we allow this fraudulent election to occur, it's on the backs of the United States Supreme Court, because they had an opportunity just to hear the evidence, and they didn't even want to hear it. They escaped it like courts so often do by standing, which means that you didn't have an injury or you didn't have a right to sue or something. Certainly that's contained in the Constitution. It's original jurisdiction for a state like Texas to sue another state, and they should have heard it. I think they were, they like to avoid things on these courts, and I think that's what they did in Congress.
Yeah. Well, it seems like that is going to be probably our last opportunity on January 6th.
Well,
So.
yeah, January 6th probably is, we're getting down to, it's either that or accept what's coming, and I think they're wide open with China. I think that it's been shown. I don't think there's going to be any investigation of Hunter Biden. I think they'll drop that immediately. You'll never hear the press mention it. You'll never hear Department of Justice mention it. It'll just be going away, just like so many other things have been ignored by the press. We've got to wake up as a people. Are we controlled by the press? Are we controlled by our Constitution? As you stated earlier, if we don't do something, we're going to lose our republic. Most people don't even know what a republic is. A republic is governed by laws. Our laws are the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, which form our organic law under the United States Code. Organic law states that our rights come from God, and the government's only role is to secure those rights for us. And when it doesn't, the people have a right to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. That's what they did in 1776. And that's what they wanted to be preserved. And if we don't wake up, we're going to lose it. And we'll have a new world order, which is what some of the Democrats actually want.
Well, and I think some of the Republicans too. I really think this whole everything that's happened since the first lockdown in March, I think has been each thing has been a little piece of the jigsaw puzzle headed toward this globalist new world order.
Well, if you look at it, Rob, the whole reason for the fear over the Wuhan virus is to keep people away from other people. So therefore, they had to have some excuse for a mail-in balance. This didn't come by accident, in my opinion.
No.
It didn't come by accident in China. China doesn't want Trump in office. Clearly, Trump's been the only president who's offered any resistance to the Chinese agenda. And if we don't stop the Chinese, they're going to take over. They're doing. So I think the Wuhan virus was manufactured, mailed out, sent out of China, and it got to the United States at a particular time where they knew this would be the reaction of the world, and give them an excuse for mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots, we've never had the volume of mail-in ballots, and that's just one part of the fraud. This systematic, smartmatic, they call it, and Dominion machines and USS machines, or whatever the others called, they all have technology in them that you can change externally. They've been programmed, and they can change those programs, and they do change those programs. There's people, as you mentioned, Smartmatic officials that vowed that President Trump would be president, and I think they knew that. I think they knew what they were going to do. They're connected to the internet, and they can see when the votes come in. They know how many change the votes, and they do. That's in addition to all other fraud that they would have.
Well, and like a lot of probably most now of our electronics, those voting machines were made in China.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it seems very obvious.
You know, they talk about Russian interference. Well, this is truly interference from external sources,
Yeah.
and getting what they want. Chinese are behind a lot of this, and they certainly don't want Trump in office. And
Yeah.
Biden was dealing with them before, evidently. If not he, his son.
Well, a smart person always has a plan B, and a really smart person has a plan B and C. So if things go the way the other side wants, and we have a President Biden in the White House on January 20th, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the last echelon under our constitutional system is for the states under the 10th Amendment to stand up and refuse some of these mandates that the president is putting out, over which he has no authority. By the way, for him to stand up and say everybody should wear a mask, what business is it of the president of the United States to order people to wear a mask? He has no authority there. Jacobson versus Massachusetts, if they want to look back at a case in the United States Supreme Court and claim the right to interfere in an epidemic, That was left to the states, according to the United States Supreme Court, not to the federal government. So they're even misinterpreting that. But I think the last bastion of defense is the state power. Power is not delegated to the United States. Health, safety, and welfare were not delegated to the United States, nor prohibited by it to the states or reserved to the states respectively or to the people. There are certain powers that not even the states have or the United States federal government. One of those is the freedom to worship God according to the dictates of our conscience. When we're told by governor that we can't go to church and assemble and do whatever we want, they have no right under the Constitution to do that. And the federal court should stop that. They know that. When they close down businesses discriminatorily and allow some businesses to stay open and others close, that's discrimination. They can't do that. Some of the businesses sell the same things that Walmart sells. But, when they interfere with contracts, it's a violation of the Constitution. When they interfere with the rights of assembly and say you can't meet with more than 10 people, that's interference under the First Amendment. The First Amendment is very plain. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. Now, one of those is the right of the press. You'll hear the press always bring up their freedom to speak whatever they want. But at the same time, they turn and deny those freedoms and won't even print about the freedoms being taken away from individuals, like the freedom of assembly or travel or whatever. And
Well, they're all on board with the agenda. They're complicit with the agenda. They're part of it. And none of this probably would have happened without the mainstream media.
well, as long as we elect presidents that are following the agenda, Republican or Democrat, everything will seem to be fine. But you elect a president that stands up for something against China, against illegal immigration. I'm not against immigration, but we do have laws. And when you disregard those laws, deferred action on childhood arrivals, DACA, was a deference by the Attorney General, Napolitano, to enforce the law. Now look what's happened. We've got people, the courts are saying, DACA has to be enforced. Well, it arose out of an attorney general that didn't want to enforce the law. Deferred action, that's what it meant. But people don't get it. Now they think DACA was a law. DACA wasn't a law, never has been. So why are courts enforcing it? So, we've got to go back to the fact that we're either under rule of law or rule of man. And right now, it's pretty clear that we're under the rule of man when they can get away with whatever they want.
Yeah, well, and a lot of what concerns me is who the man is that we're under the rule of. So,
well, one thing, I'm going to say this, I hope you understand this. Appreciate the fact that I know what Democrats stand for. They tell you.
yeah, right.
What I don't appreciate is what Republicans stand for, because they don't even know. They stand just remaining in power and not following the laws as long as they can stay in power. I'm sure there are exceptions in the Congress, but I think Trump was an exception. He stood up for what he believed and what he knew, and they didn't like it. And when they don't like it, and when China doesn't like it, they do something about it. And they just had a lot of people in our country helping them.
Well, yeah, the Republican leadership here in Wisconsin has been absolutely reprehensible through all of this, and they continue to be. So, but just to give you an idea of what may be coming if we get a President Biden, take a look at who he's picking for his cabinet. This just came out yesterday. He has chosen someone named Charlotte Clymer for the U.S. Secretary of Education. Charlotte Clymer is a transgender. That's a man who likes to play dress up as a woman. This is our Secretary of Education under Joe Biden, if that should happen.
It's for children, isn't it? That they're different gender than what they were born with.
Yeah, I mean, they just can't get a hold of the kids young enough anymore, can they?
Betty's a member of the education institution.
So,
Betty's
but
the educational lobby too.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? You kind of cut out.
Education Association.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
So it makes sense. They've got an agenda to keep their agenda, is what it is.
Well, and that's why we're in the situation we are. We have the young people out on the streets rioting and looting and burning, and they don't have even a fifth grade comprehension of a civics class.
They don't socialism.
They don't know what socialism is. They have no clue. So, yeah. Well,
socialism was tried in our country in the 1600s in Jamestown. It failed. And they went to the redistribution of the property then, and it failed because they had people that wouldn't work. So they went to individual ownership, and it did work. And our country wasn't developed on socialism. We saw that experiment back in 1607. That's over and done for. And we should realize it, but people don't study their history. They don't study what socialism.
Well, there's so many people now that just don't want to work. Why should they work when they can make more money with a government handout? They just don't understand that the government handout is just monopoly money they're printing, and eventually that's all going to come crashing down on us.
That's right. That's money, and that's fake wealth. And I recall one thing Samuel Adams said in 1776 in August on the steps of the Philadelphia State House. He said that if you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude more than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands that feed you. May your chains sit light upon you. And may posterity forget that you were ever our countrymen. They had some resolve back then that we lack today. They knew there was something more important than money and power and materialism. It was liberty. And they knew that that the source of liberty, the source of freedom was God. And that God gave us rights that man can't take away. That's why we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. In other words, its whole function of government is your liberty. Now we've seen our liberty taken away and government turning a deaf ear to it. And I think that we've got to stand up. We've got to stand up for our rights under the Constitution and under the Declaration.
Well, and I'm sort of encouraged because I do believe that there are millions of patriots out there who are going to stand up. Unfortunately, we're probably going to have to work around the elected officials, even our Republican so-called leaders, because they're not on board with it. They're not on board with us.
I think that's it's been here for a while, Rob. There's been an establishment in Washington that has just been in the battle with the Democrats, and they both are basically people that want to retain their positions in Washington, retain their position of power, of authority, of special privileges, and they don't want to give it. So they play a little game up there, but the game's over now. Yeah. We're seeing people take power that want to turn our country from what it was meant to be. We've got to be either dedicated to the Republican form of government, and I don't mean that in a political sense, the constitutional Republican form of government that we have, or we're going to lose it. And it's going to be too late when people lose it to get it back. It's taken lives of millions of men and women to preserve that, and we shouldn't give it up without a fight.
Right. Well, we are out of time. It's hard to believe that this hour went so fast, but where can folks find out more about you and what you're doing now?
Well, I'm the president past emeritus of the Foundation for Moral Law. They go to morallaw.org. They found out about suits we're filing. We have filed 2 suit against the governor of Louisiana and governor of Alabama. And these were all taking away our constitutional rights because of this pandemic. I'm involved in some other things, and we stand up for the right to acknowledge God according to the dictates of our conscience. We write briefs to the United States Supreme Court when they try to take away our religious liberty. And that's basically what I do.
So that's morallaw.org?
Yes.
Okay, morallaw.org. And I have to plug this again. This is I know this is an oldie. I know you've done a lot more since, but my favorite is still, So Help Me God, Judge Roy Moore.
Well, thank you. And Rob, we've written a pamphlet called One Nation Under God, and it gives you the 4 documents, the Declaration of the Constitution, Blackstone's commentaries, and George Washington's farewell address, which kids used to be taught, but they're not. And we have these pamphlets available as well.
Okay, great. So morallaw.org. And by the way, happy anniversary to you and Kayla this past Monday.
35.
35, yes. My wife and I are at 30. So, well, God bless you. Thank you for being with us here today. I will not be here next week, but Mike Heath will, and he's got a great guest lined up for you too. It's always good to have you folks here, and God bless you. I will see you in the new year.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you.